Metroid Prime was a legendary title that came out and redefined the first-person genre, setting the stage for more games like it to come out and wow the audience, with new adventures and worlds and games, to show off just what this medium can be. So obviously, you can't just stop at one, and after earning a nice chunk of change from a game that they believed would undersell at best, Nintendo went straight to Retro to order up a new game ASAP. And when the big N comes calling, you better answer. And so Retro got right to work on a new Metroid project, starting things off with an idea they called Metroid Prime 1.5, which would have been a more multiplayer-focused first-person shooter in lieu of other space shooters in the genre like Halo. The game would have taken place right after Metroid Prime, allowing Samus to keep all her upgrades from the first game, but making up for that by having an increased overall difficulty for the adventure. The story would have involved Samus's ship automatically detecting and following a distress signal, while Samus was asleep following her beating the Prime Metroid. When Samus wakes up, she finds herself on a broken down ship that's controlled by 4 psychotic AI, who would change and rotate the ship around to try and kill Samus, while she would have to use all of her abilities just to barely survive. Also, the ship would fold between dimensions and was stocked full of warriors that were thirsting to destroy a very peaceful planet. It was a wild pitch, to say the least, and I'm actually pretty surprised how much it ended up matching a Halo Metroid crossover idea I've been wanting to make for a long time. But the game would end up with Samus annihilating the warship and saving the peaceful planet. There was also an idea that Samus wasn't the only bounty hunter that was drawn in, and that maybe the AI wanted their bodies to help improve its own little Frankenstein warriors. Kinda like Hugh Metroids or something it was working on, which is as messed up as it is kind of funny when we think about poor Sammy's future. The multiplayer came in the idea that Samus would be able to duplicate herself in order to help her fight. There were also a wide variety of other multiplayer modes, including a 3v1 mode where 3 players would be a Samus clone, and the other would be an Omega Pirate trying to kill them, which sounds awesome and kinda reminds me of that one Nintendo Land game with Ridley. Ultimately, this Prime 1.5 sounds really amazing and pretty fun. One problem though, multiplayer isn't necessarily the main thing people want out of a Metroid, especially since, the last main series Metroid game also featured Samus going through an abandoned ship. They didn't really want to double up on that idea. So they decided to scrap this plan and begin work on a more single-player focused game. Though, as I mentioned, a lot of this would come back in other forms for the franchise. After 1.5 was settled, it was time for Retro to get their head in the game, especially since the development of Prime 2 was a lot more stressful than Prime 1. Last time, they made Metroid Prime in their own little world, except for Miyamoto's daily table flip, but otherwise they had complete creative control, and they were able to make things with, less pressure than usual. So, when Metroid Prime came out and was such a huge success, that double-edged sword soon began to draw Retro's blood. You see, Chowda, corporations and fans have these things in their bodies called expectations.
Are expectations bad?
Well, not necessarily. But sometimes to reach or to maintain these expectations can be difficult and stressful, which is why a lot of gaming companies do everything in their power to lower those expectations, only to raise them back up to make Bobby Kotick's parachute diamond encrusted. Okay, look, Prime had its fans and it made its money, so now you had to do all of that again, which was one, an already huge ask with how hectic the first game's dev was, and the fact that both Retro and their friends across the pond were still worn ragged after what happened last time. And 2, they wanted this done in around half the time. Ugh. But hey, I guess that comes with the territory of success. So, Retro got to work, and this time they had an idea that was a little bit more Metroid in mind. You see, Mike Wicken came up with a pitch for a light and dark theme to base the game around. He wanted something that would feel easy for the player to understand. And what's more simple than the typical conflict of good versus evil? but it went a bit deeper than that. In his own words, we wanted to push and pull. The whole game is pushing and pulling you back and forth between the dark and the light. It ended up being that we wanted something that would feed into that dichotomy, that conflict between the two, and how the player's basic abilities reflect that. The team even went as far as to contact the Zelda team to get advice, which is probably a really good idea considering the many times that series has pulled on a similar dichotomy. In fact, I wasn't very shocked when I learned that the first time, as Prime 2 really does feel like a Zelda game in a lot of ways, with its two worlds idea, and the three main temples that are the main attractions of its areas. Though this idea was also chosen as it was actually really easy to add more content cheaply, as they could just reuse objects in between the two worlds, practically doubling the game world with little to no extra work needed. Though this proved to be too ambitious and a lot of the Dark World was scaled down from its Light World counterpart. And then after all the things were set into place, Retro got off to the races working on and marketing the game, using a formula that was very familiar to us Halo fans, as it launched multiple viral marketing campaigns that included things like a conspiracy theory website about aliens, a fake astronaut program with a woman lead exploring other planets, and other Metroid-esque ideas with plenty of hints and secrets that made the fans go crazy. Prime 2 released to critical acclaim with reviews and awards claiming it to be the best Gamecube game of 2004, and was even a finalist for the best action-adventure game of that year. The gameplay of Metroid Prime 2 is pretty much the same as its predecessor, with it being a first-person Metroidvania where Samus has to blast her way through another half-corrupted planet, with plenty of returning weapons and power-ups like the Spider Ball, Super Missile, and even stuff cut out of the first game like the Screw Attack, which works pretty similar to the one in Super Metroid, except it's a little bit more awkward to time, but it is still cool to see. You got your usual Metroid fare, though this time, however, things are a bit more, let's say, split. You see, everything in Prime 2 centers around the theme of light and dark. From the different areas of Aether with their dark and light parallels, with how Samus has to swap between the dimensions to solve puzzles and explore different areas. But it's not just in the world. Enemies and bosses typically get their second wind or their stronger variation by mixing up their lightness or their darkness with the opposite, which I think is a really cool idea for a second phase in most of the boss fights. And Samus herself isn't missing out on that fun, with the new dark and light suits which allow her to survive in the hazardous Dark Aether, and the dark and light beams which are her main weapons for this game, swapping between each one to deliver super effective attacks on the creatures of either Aether, while also carrying some properties from her older beams, like the Dark Beam, which works a lot like the Prime Ice Beam, and the Light Beam kind of being like the Plasma Beam but with an added scatter shot. Then in the later half of the game, Samus gets the Annihilator Beam, which mixes both beams for a super powered shot, though it does use both ammos, which is where I kinda have a problem. I don't like that the beams have an ammo count, especially because like last time, we swap between them a lot. And I mean, at least they have like a weak shot so you don't use ammo for like doors or something. But still, it's inconvenient to run out of a specific type of beam when you need it, though thankfully when that happens you can just use the opposite beam to force an enemy to drop the other ammo, which is a unique idea, but like I still don't care for it. The game's difficulty was something that the devs put a lot of work into as they developed Prime 2. As in their minds, a lot of players would be coming off the original Prime already adjusted to the latter half's difficulty. So they decided to turn up the heat with this game, which is probably what inspired the annoyingest, wonderful addition that was taking constant damage outside of light in the Dark World. Hooray! Honestly though, I didn't really see that big a difference in the overall difficulty of Prime 2 in comparison to Prime 1. I mean, sure, a more challenging difficulty doesn't automatically mean Dark Souls, and I guess if we are taking the Dark World's many drawbacks to Samus's health into account, then yeah, this game is overall more difficult, but I wouldn't say it's like crazy hard if you're somebody who would find that kind of thing intimidating.
His toenails!
I don't blame you at all.
His toenails! No! Why?
The game also features a 4-player multiplayer mode, kind of like I mentioned before with the Prime 1.5 stuff. And this was essentially just deathmatch, but with like Samus clones, kind of like that 1.5, but just like really toned down. It's fine. It's cool. I don't really have a lot to say about it. The music for this game is, well, Metroid music. So of course, it just slaps harder than my father's belt. That's probably not that funny. Slaps harder than Ridley hits Samus's father. No, that's not really all that good either. Slaps harder than, I don't know, the economy. Is that funny? Eh, probably not. But the music here is really good. Probably not as like iconic as other themes in the series like Prime, but at the same time, it's doing something very different here. And I really admire a lot of the horror vibe that went into the design and music for this game. I mean, some tracks like Dark Argon Wastes make it feel like you're being watched or hunted. And considering the anger always on your trail, it does really bring out that anxious feeling. Especially with how difficult it is to even breathe in those early dark areas. Samus is way out of her depth, or at least very heavily disadvantaged in these areas. And the music really helps convey that. And then finally letting you relax when you hear the religious chants in the Luminoff's holy temples of light. Sure, you're not exactly safe here, but you know, at the very least you're at better footing. And then we have a lot of the Prime-styled Metroid music. You know, the stuff with the old techno-whiny sound. Oh, Chubby, that's awful. That's not even that good of an impression. What am I doing? I don't know what it's called, but like, I love it. Especially how you can find it in many tracks across the game. Especially fitting in this crazy cool high-tech fortress. And then we have the boss themes that just rock as much as you'd expect. And good old Torbus Bog. Yeah, didn't expect this weird swamp place to have some of the most Metroid sounding music, huh? Anyone else getting a Ben 10 vibe from this place? I mean, I could just see Swampfire or Ripjaws just pop out of nowhere here. I don't know, it's kind of nostalgic, I like it.
Heat Blast and Ripjaws.
The visuals for this game are good. Yeah, everything looks really nice. I enjoy the level of detail added to the environments. I think the wildlife and the monster designs are well executed and fit their post-apocalyptic surroundings. The whole game is like low-key a zombie apocalypse if you're willing to connect the dots. Everything in both the light and dark world show a suitable age and decay after years on years of war and bloodshed. And then Samus and her many armors are all shiny and look wonderful. Even this overstimulating thing. Can you imagine trying to get a nap in with those kneecaps and those spotlights coming out from all the holes of your body? Hell no. But this does fit the Holy Savior motif that Samus is kind of rocking for this game. Though I do have one issue with the game's visuals. I wish the light world was more colorful. I mean, don't get me wrong, we get plenty of colors here and there, especially compared to the dark world's overwhelming grays and purple. But something about the light world just really makes me wish it popped a lot to like contrast the dark world. I mean, a lot of this game's color palette can kind of look pretty dull. Well, except for the Cyber Fortress, you know, I love that Tron looking asshole. But yeah, you know, otherwise, yes, the post-war is not going to look its Sunday best, but like, that just leaves me unable to really tell the difference between the dark and light areas without the purple filter telling me what I'm looking at. The game does not look bad, I just wish more of the light areas had some more to them, you know? Except for you, Tron, you're looking perfect.
Am I still to create the perfect system? Yeah.
Alright. It's story time. Skip here to avoid all story spoilers for Metroid Prime 2. Sometime after the events of Prime 1, Samus is given a notice by the Galactic Republic that some troopers have went missing on a mission to the planet Aether. And Samus, being the good little lapdog she is, puts on her murder suit and zooms off to see what's up. Making it to the planet, she comes across the troopers' facilities, though the troopers themselves are... yeah. If Samus is called in for something, these guys' corpses are usually the reason. Not what I meant! But it is cool to see these guys in a game for once. Before now, they were just kind of like in the manuals and stuff. After fighting off the possessed troopers, Samus makes her way through the planet, eventually coming across a large irradiated area of Phazon and hello handsome. Samus follows this disastrous doppelganger into a portal, leaving her in the dark version of the area she was just in, and at the mercy of the devilish creatures making this area their home, though they don't seem to attack our new friend. And that's what I get for turning off the gravity suit. Samus barely manages to escape the Darklings, but her suit was compromised, stripping it of a lot of its equipment. Samus, now both exhausted and pissed off, explores the rest of the planet to try to figure out what the hell's going on, eventually finding the ship the troopers came in on, and watching the recordings of the troopers being slaughtered by those same dark creatures. They should really just start sending me in first. Samus moves on, intent on figuring out what's going on, and then she comes across a temple filled with odd language barriers, and I do mean that literally, and some sleeping moth people. Speaking of, one of them seems to be awake and wishes to speak to Samus. Whoa! Aether, you gotta keep that thing trained on everyone you meet? Well, considering we're in zombie apocalypse territory. Oh yes, fair enough. The stranger identifies himself as Umos, and Umos informs Samus that his species are known as the Luminoth, a race of moth people that, get this, worship the light. Oh, how cute. What's not cute is the Phazon meteorite that struck their planet Aether, combining it with its dark counterpart from another plane. One with light-loving Luminoth and the other a dark wasteland ruled by the corrupting Ing, which is trying to destroy its brighter counterparts. And they were pretty much successful, stealing away the 3 main lights from the 3 main Luminoth temples, and wiping out the Luminoth to the point of near extinction, with the remaining bugs hibernating in the last safe haven. Umoth hopes Samus will succeed where the Luminoth failed, in traveling through the different areas and their dark counterparts to bring back the 3 lights, allowing them to purge themselves of the dark dimension and saving their planet. Samus, being the kind-hearted woman she is, agrees, especially because of the Ing are taking over Aether. They may be able to spread across the galaxy, and we don't need any more parasites! You can guess where things go from here. Umos sends Samus to the 3 locations where she travels to the Dark World and frees the 3 lights, along the way seeing recordings and bodies of the fallen Luminoth warriors, as well as learning their languages. While she travels, she meets up and fights with Dark Samus. And who is this exactly? Well, if you remember the secret ending of Prime, then you'd know we saw a menacing hand pop out of the corpse of the Metroid Prime. This Dark Samus is a fusion between the Dark Suit and the Prime's core. This new being now traveling the galaxy on the hunt for Phazon, trying to regain its power. And lucky for her, there's plenty on Dark Aether, and her greatest enemy is here for her to slaughter as well. A 2-for-1 special. But Dark Samus isn't the only intruder trying to make use of the planet's suffering. The space pirates are here too, and they've learned nothing. Oh my god, talk about the dumbest people in the galaxy. How many times do you dipshits need to learn this lesson? The lesson that is mutating the already extremely dangerous bioweapon and just haphazardly starving and dumping them in weak little containers is a recipe for disaster. They must have went to the US military school of running an army. Just keep sending more bodies and bonds and maybe it'll work itself out. God, now I'm just imagining baby praying mantises doing that dumbass high school pull-up challenge. Though another funny thing about these guys is that they couldn't really tell the difference between Samus and Dark Samus at first, so a bunch of their logs just talk about how odd it is that the hunter keeps teleporting into their base, speaking directly to the bioweapons, and then teleporting out, like, huh, maybe we should do something about that. Nah. As soon as Ridley is out of the picture, these guys lose all aura of a potential threat. I did like the turn section though, that was pretty fun. But getting back on topic, Samus makes her way through the twin Aethers, swapping between worlds to fight enemies and solve puzzles, all the while learning about the Aether's history, fighting the Ing and settling the stars, like their good friends the Chozo. God bless, of course they're here. But Samus learns all about this while also fighting her own dark counterpart. Eventually Samus collects all 3 lights, but is informed by Umos that there is indeed a 4th light locked inside the Sky Fortress, with the only way of getting there being another set of MacGuffins like the keys last. Oh, do we really have to do all this again? Well, Samus does, and she makes her way to the fortress, battling against the Emperor Aang and his many forms. And after defeating the beast in a fairly decent final boss fight, to be honest, the second phase was a little odd and the third one could be a little bit tough to hit with the dark ammo, but it was fun. And now, with the final light in tow, it's time to get out of Dodge before Dark Aether collapses in on itself. With the time ticking, Samus rushes her way out of the fortress, only to be met with Dark Samus guarding the portal home. Ugh, looking a bit rough, aren't we? But I guess getting vaporized will do that to somebody. The final battle with Dark Samus is the true finale, with Samus having to use her different visors and beams to weaken her, though only with a charged power beam filled with the Phazon DS gives off is what Samus needs to finish her. Huh, second versus same as the first, I guess. Though it took me a try or two to figure this out. After another victory for the OG, Samus returns to the world of light, returning all the light she collected, including the suits, oddly enough, and then saying farewell as she heads off on her next mission. Though, just like last time, if you collected all the items, you get a scene of Metroid Prime once again reforming herself in Samus's image. The story of Prime 2 is honestly really cool. I enjoyed the idea of the two separate worlds and the duality or dichotomy of the worlds and its hero. The post-war setting giving off a lot of really interesting vibes we don't see in a series like Metroid, and I liked Moss and the Luminoth. But that's kind of about it. I really don't have a lot more to really add to that thought. The Ing are very fun to fight, but character-wise, there's really nothing going on. They're basically just the Phazon and Metroid Prime again, or at least in function. The pirates are the pirates, so outside of data logs, there's really nothing going on with them. I think, or at least I wish we got a more speaking villain role to complement Moss in the light world. I mean, that might be where Dark Samus comes in, but she's really just here for the Phazon, and as such she wants to prevent Samus from disrupting the link between the worlds. But she's not really a part of the pirates or the Ing, so there's not much to draw from there, and she doesn't talk. Again, it's not a bad story, I just wish we got a little bit more from the other side of the war. Like maybe if the Emperor Aang spoke to Samus in her mind when she's in the Dark World, trying to corrupt her Palpatine style. And maybe like Dark Samus is like Dark Vader or some shit. I don't know, just a little, it needed a little something extra. But that's Prime 2, an experimental look at what a Metroid game can be. And that's what makes it special in a lot of people's eyes, but also kind of makes it in a lot of others. I don't think I've really seen anyone outright hate this game online, but there's a lot of people who are either just obsessed with it or just kind of indifferent. I think I fall closer to indifferent. Not that I dislike the game, I just don't love it like many others. But I do appreciate what was done with it. My complaints about Prime 1 being a little too reliant on the standard Metroid tropes was obviously a sentiment that was felt by the creators, and they wanted to turn loose and make their own Metroid experience and set it quite a ways apart from what we know, while also staying true to the core of the Metroid series. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes is a unique game with a lot to love, and I hope you get to experience that love if you're interested. You can play this game on the OG Gamecube and the Prime Trilogy like with Prime 1, and also its exclusive Wii port, which is interesting. Though, sadly, this game hasn't really gotten a remaster like its predecessor, and with Prime 4 now on the horizon, I don't think we'll be seeing one anytime soon. Unless you're willing to get a bit experimental. Prime Hack is a modified version of the GameCube/Wii emulator Dolphin that adds all kinds of custom settings and controller support for the Metroid Prime games, and it was the main way I played 2 after my Wii U shit itself a few months back, but Prime Hack is a wonderful way to experience these games. It might be the Halo fan in me, but playing these games with like a normal control style was an absolute blast. And it's even really easy to set up like a regular Wiimote, which is still the best way to play these games. Just wanted to shout this out in case you're interested, but had no other way of playing Prime 2 and Prime 3. This was a wonderful substitute and will probably be the definitive way to play these games until Nintendo gets off their asses and remaster them. Not even remake, just remaster. Also, yes, the controller can do the motion stuff in Prime 3. I checked and it was perfect. I'm so glad fans do what Nintendo really should have by now.